My name is Derrick Bergman. I'm a journalist, photographer and activist and currently the chairman of the VOC, the Union for the Abolition of Cannabis Prohibition here in the Netherlands. I will try to explain a bit how the coffee shop system in Holland works and the troubles surrounding it in recent years. To understand the coffee shop phenomenon, we have to get back to 1976, when the Dutch opium law was changed to decriminalize cannabis for personal use. It was no longer a criminal offense from then on if you had a maximum of 30 grams of cannabis on you or in your house. The coffee shops were never really intended by the policymakers of those days. The arrangement that was made in the early 70s was all about the so-called house dealer in youth centers, where a lot of youth came together for concerts and all that kind of thing. And there was a rule by the police that if they have one person that only sells soft drugs, so cannabis products, and no other illegal drugs, that he will be tolerated within the youth center. What happened next is that some smart entrepreneurs in Holland saw this phenomenon of the tolerated house dealer selling only cannabis and thought, well, why not do this outside the youth center in just a commercial shop? This is basically how the coffee shop was born. Back in those days, in the 70s, there was no homemade cannabis, no cannabis production in Holland itself. It was all import of hashish and grass from the traditional producer countries such as Morocco and Nepal and India. This obviously changed. So here we come to one part of the problem that has arisen around the coffee shops, because over time there have been rules for coffee shops to adhere to, but there were never any rules for the production of cannabis. Any kind of production of cannabis in Holland is still illegal. This is obviously a big problem for the coffee shops, because where do they get their cannabis? Well, they are forced to buy it on the black market, because the system still does not allow for any form of regulation of the production or wholesale for the coffee shops. So this is one of the pressing problems that we've been seeing over the last years. We see now developments into finally making some sort of arrangement, at least to facilitate the coffee shops. There has been a law proposal by the Dutch party D66, and it now enjoys a majority in Parliament, in the second chamber here in Holland. So, what does this law proposal say? It's strictly limited to the coffee shops and the production for the coffee shops. So the system will look like a number of permits will be given out to producers who can then be checked by the authorities. And in this way there will be a closed circuit, a full transparent chain from the seed to the end consumer in the coffee shop. So this is a step in the right direction, we think, as VOC. But at the same time, we think it's a real missed opportunity that this law proposal by D66 only covers the coffee shop. It does not cover any home growing for people who grow a limited amount of plants for their own personal use. And it doesn't mention cannabis social clubs or any other form of cooperative organizations who can grow for the members, the adult members of the club, like we see in Spain, for instance, and also in Belgium and other European countries. What will be an optimal regulation model for cannabis according to the VOC? It's a very interesting question. We of course spend a lot of time discussing these things. Already in 2011 we presented a model for regulation of cannabis in the Netherlands, and I can say that pretty much the standards of that model that we created in 2011 still remain the same today. So what we would like is for the coffee shops to basically continue in the way that they are working now with producers, but then to have the producers totally transparent, paying taxes, being able to have people checking on the grow, seeing that they don't use any pesticides. But we think this should really be a free market kind of setup, where you can still, of course, have some limitations, but it's very, very important that the coffee shop remains or keeps the possibility that they have now to choose from different growers, to have enough varieties, and also make sure that the quality is good. If a grower does not grow according to the quality standards, you should be able to go to another grower. Basically the same as most products in the market. So because this is about cannabis and not about washing detergent, of course there can be quality controls, there can be limitations, but we think as VOC it would be a big mistake to really centralize and even give a monopoly to one or a small amount of producers to service the coffee shops with the weed. In any regulation model, we strongly feel there should be the home growing should be in the model. There are certain different ways to make guarantees so that adult people can grow their own cannabis for their own personal needs. So it's hard to put figures on the number of plants or maybe the number of square meters that people could use inside their house. So we like to keep that open, but it's pivotal for us to at least have the home growing thing inside the regulation proposal. Same goes for cannabis social clubs. This is especially important for countries outside the Netherlands. But also in the Netherlands, it's good to remember we have about 400 cities in total in Holland, of which only 100 cities actually have coffee shops. So in 3/4 of the country, there is not one single coffee shop in town. So for all these cities and villages and towns, a cannabis social club could be a real good alternative to a coffee shop. Best arguments to influence public opinion, and when you talk about cannabis, there are a lot of negative effects of prohibition. Actually, we have 18 negative effects of prohibition on our website in Dutch and in English, so there is a whole list. I won't go from one to the next on it, or else this video message might be a lot longer than 10 minutes. First, what's always useful to explain to politicians and to journalists and to concerned parents is that especially because there are some risks attached to consuming cannabis, we should not leave it to the mafia. We should have a better system than that, where there are checks and where there are quality controls on the products and on the way that the products are sold. Another very good argument is that nowhere is there proof that a repressive prohibitionist policy of cannabis leads to lower use of cannabis. If you look at a lot of the statistics on the subject, it actually turns out that whether you have a strict policy or a more liberal policy does not directly influence the number of users or the amount of use. What is very clear is that if you have a prohibitionist policy, so a ban on cannabis, you get a lot of negative results. You get a lot of crime involved, you have a worse quality product for higher prices. There's all kinds of negative effects. So, first, if you want to explain to people why it's better to legalize, you can say the ban does not help in getting the amount of use down. So you should really always focus on harm reduction, meaning people are always going to use cannabis, so how are we going to make a system that makes that very safe and also decreases the availability to minors, because nobody wants people underage smoking cannabis. So that's important to understand and to explain to people. If you have an illegal market, everyone is welcome there. No one has to show an ID. Whether you're 15 years old or 17 years old, you can buy, and then you can buy any kind of drug, any kind of illegal drug on the illegal market. In Holland, one of the wonderful things of the coffee shop system is if you go to a coffee shop, you are guaranteed that you will not be offered any hard drugs, no speed, no ecstasy, no nothing, only cannabis products. So for me, myself, as a parent of 3 children, I think it's a very good idea that I know if my sons would go to a coffee shop, they will only be exposed to the cannabis. So if they want to experiment with cannabis, they can do so in a safe environment. Promising international developments. Well, I can say there are a lot, we think, at VOC. If you look around the world, of course, especially to the United States, but also other countries like Jamaica and Canada and Uruguay. Spain you can also include in this in this group of countries. You see that there's a lot of movement towards decriminalization and ultimately legalization of cannabis. So I think that is very positive for any European country, that we can. In the past it was only the Netherlands that activists could point to and say, well, there is an alternative to cannabis prohibition. Now we have a lot of alternatives around the world that people can point to, and that also politicians and policymakers can study to learn the lessons and have a best practice if they want to regulate and legalize cannabis in their own country. So I think those are all very interesting and very hopeful developments. And I also think that the rising popularity of cannabis oil will be very good news for the legalization movement. This is a real game changer. Before, if you want to experience the medical benefits of cannabis, you had to either smoke or vaporize or maybe eat an edible. But the oil has made cannabis accessible to a lot of groups that it wasn't accessible to before, or that didn't want to try it. So this includes children with epilepsy, but also older people who might not feel comfortable smoking or vaporizing. Now with the oil, it's a fantastic way for them to get introduced to the medicinal powers and benefits of cannabis without any really taboo around it. At VOC we get a lot of requests for information from all kinds of people, especially older people, who have heard about the cannabis oil and want to try it for pain or for better sleep or any kind of trouble that they might have. So I think this will certainly influence the debate and also reach politicians and media, that this is a plant that is actually a very benevolent plant and that can really benefit a lot of people.